Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech is the Red Raider men's basketball program in for a portal pivot. Also, watering, fertilizing, maintaining this precious college sports ecosystem. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen. And today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/Locked On College. Terms and conditions apply. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, kicking off another week and a couple of different things to dive into on today's episode. Want to get to some comments from a Big 12 athletics director as it relates to the future of the college sports or college football ecosystem. But first, let's start here in the 806 after another weekend gone by, another 5-10 minutes gone by, which seems like an eternity when we're talking portal time. We've had some names recently swirling around the Texas Tech solar system that we've been kind of focusing in on, but just wanted to check in for a quick update as to the status or the state of those names and the state of other possible options, and wondering if Texas Tech this week is in for a bit of a pivot as far as their portal plan is concerned. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the names that we have been talking about a lot lately, great Obasor. I still don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not, but I think that I'm phonetically I'm saying it correctly. But anyway, it may not matter based on this conversation. And JT Toppin, okay, the New Mexico, portal entry recently that's going through the NBA process, and then Trezarian White from UNC Wilmington. Two of those three have visited your campus. I think reportedly had good visits. Can't confirm whether you make an offer, whether that's scholarship or there was NIL stuff or if they have an option to actually play here. I'm going to assume so, just because they took visits here, and I think that's kind of like a close to a final step that you don't bring them on a visit unless you're very serious about them playing here. But and some of this can change quickly. I always have to add that in when you start talking about the portal, because it does change so quickly. And I also want to point out too, before we get going here, that there's just nothing for sure. And what I mean by that is even I think guys that you have, that were in the portal, like I'm not exactly sure if they ever entered the portal and then they commit somewhere. Did they take themselves out of the portal? Are they still technically in? Are they binded to anything? So just be careful out there about assuming too much about guys' rosters being locked in and being committed and all those things. And again, there's the caveat of they had to have been in the portal at one point, and now that the portal window's closed, I mean those guys would be locked in. So anyway, just kind of be gray area, right?
Sure.
But I think Obasor, I think he's gonna. All indications to me is that really heavily points to Louisville. I don't think there is an announcement yet that I'm aware of, but I think it, and a lot of people feel like Washington may be the team to beat. So it just doesn't. I don't get the sense that Texas Tech is the favorite or the likely landing spot. But I'll just add this in: until he commits elsewhere and is good to go and public about it, don't rule out the Red Raiders. But I don't think you're going to end up with him. But we'll see. JT Toppin, I think that is likely NBA or UT with Texas Tech kind of somewhere in the background. Don't know if he's actually even going to make a visit here. And if he doesn't make a visit here, then odds are you don't like your chances. But again, you can't until he commits or decides what he's doing and is public about it. You're still wanting to be involved and all those things. So those are just two guys that I think you were kind of hoping for one or the other. Whether you had a preference over one or the other, but may end up with neither. Palms up, I don't know. But again, you can't close the book on it yet. And then there's Trezarian White, who I think came here and had a good visit, but I think that there's some discussion that he may decide midweek this week. Again, can change. So don't hold me or anything else to that because this stuff changes quickly. But he was just at TCU, and I think had a good visit at TCU. So if you don't end up with him, he's one that you may be having to play against.
Oh, joy.
Yeah. And if not one of those three guys, Calvin, I mean, you're still on the hunt for personnel here.
Yeah,
you are definitely looking to add. You have nine scholarship players, and that's 4 available scholarships should you choose to use them. And I think we've been very made it clear they would like at least one more, at least individual that can heavily contribute and play and contribute and is expected to start or fill up 25 to 30 minutes on the stat sheet and all those things. So, yeah.
I don't know for what reason it was, but it seemed like if you've had your ear to the railroad track, so to speak, since Osibor landed in the LBK, that those percentages,
yes,
it sounds like those percentages started going way down very quickly. And I kind of wonder if that was a monetary value issue because it's not so hard to gather. It's a little harder to gather. Like, oh, does he like us? Does he like our restaurants? Does he like our practice facility? Does he like the cheerleaders? Does he like this? Like that's a little more time it takes, I guess, to figure that out. But if he steps off the plane, it's like, I'd like $1.5 million. You're like, okay, I've got $750,000 to spend. That's pretty quickly a good indication. So I don't know if it was that, but it seems like everything that I've heard since he took his visit or was in Lubbock, like the percentages started plummeting. So I don't know exactly what to attribute it to. And there is also the factor of, I don't know what percentage you put this at as far as impact, but local podcast host mispronouncing a guy's name. So that's our fault. I'd like to think, even if we don't ever see JT Toppin, I'd like to thank him for having a name that's very easy to sound out. You got Osibors, you got Trezarians. I mean, it's a minefield for a couple of guys, at least one. I know you're from the city, but I'm from the flatland country. One, trying to sound out these guys' names. But I do know that when you're talking about a list of targets, it would be foolish, and I'm assuming naive of us to believe that this would be the reality where it's like, okay, we got these 3 targets. Oh, wait, no. Now what? There's got to be at all times, I know you've described this way from a football standpoint, a running and gunning kind of list of these guys that you like. And whether you call it fall back on or whatever, we'll pursue on the other side of whatever the outcomes are, yes or no, from some of your top targets. So I'll be curious to see this week maybe what names are kind of coming up if those realities do come to fruition where you're not landing some of these guys. But yeah, I was feeling probably better about, again, just my local yokel perspective, but feeling better about JT Toppin than anybody. But yeah, if you don't get a visit, I mean, unless it's some type of Filipino mail order big man situation where, yeah, they don't ever have to come see it. We'll just send them right to your doorstep and boom, you're in a relationship, buddy. Yeah, you got to feel not so good about the opportunity to get him to join your squad. But I guess let's act like if these were wiped off the list, Chris, we're still going to be back into discussing big man options. We're still talking about some front court pursuits, right? Or am I wrong?
This is where you could pivot and you kind of adjust here. And I think ideally, yes. I mean, ideally, you want. I think if you could draw it up, and you could add one more primary piece to your roster, it would be a 4-man, potentially a starting 4-man that can score and rebound, but can also fill up the minutes at the 5. Okay, in a perfect world. Now, you may not get your perfect world. It's a great movie. Kevin Costner was in it with a little kid that wore a ghost mask and all that. You have to Google it. Just trust me. But that's the name of a movie. Yeah, it is actually pretty good. It took place in the state of Texas, actually. I don't know if true story or not, but it's pretty good. It involves the Texas Rangers. Yeah, where I went from there, I have no idea. But sometimes you do this, sometimes I do this. You never know what's going to get me swerved off the road.
Hey, I'm always looking for a new Kevin Costner flick. Never heard of it.
It's actually pretty good. Yeah, it's actually good flick. Clint Eastwood in it too.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But you may end up getting to, we've had these talks too, Cowan, where you just may end up going like, okay, best player available. I mean, that's where Trezarian White, like, okay, this isn't the skill set we were necessarily hoping for. Maybe he's looking to score too much. We've already got some of that. The chemistry may not work. I don't know. That's up to Grant and his coaching staff to decide after they've been around the player. They know what the players want. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's as much about chemistry as it is fit and all these things. And so we'll just have to kind of see what bears fruit here as the weeks go on, because you still have to add some pieces here. I think that part is clear, and you've got time. I just don't know where they want to, where they want to focus next, and is there door number 3 that we just haven't thought of, or that they have in their back pocket? All options are on the table, but I guess I would say you just have to wait for some of these announcements first before we start ruling some of these guys out. I'm just going off of kind of some of the indications that I've been getting. Yeah. And the way the wind's blowing on some of this stuff with Asabor to Louisville and Toppin to UT, and then White maybe to TCU. But, I mean, could you end up with 1 or 2 of these guys? I mean, again, I can't close up shop on that. It's not what I'm expecting, but I'm just trying to be transparent here. But again, until it's finalized, you're just not real sure, and you can't say, okay, we're out. I mean, you're not out until you see an announcement, I would guess. And even then, I still kind of wonder about it based on the gray area we were talking about before.
I'm sorry, did you use the word wait? We're college sports fans, Chris. That's speaking Spanish. This is the Rush to Judgment podcast, okay? We're ready to make a decision on who we're mad or glad with immediately, regardless of official indications. And you are right, and it's something that I think about, even for the guys that have decided on Texas Tech. And I think you've said this before, like until they're sitting in a classroom or whatever that finish line looks like, the gray area continues to be there for possible change. So I would just say buckle up or remain buckle up for any of that possibility, maybe some to play out in your favor. Before we leave this subject really quickly, I'm just wondering how you would feel about comparing and contrasting like roster building now compared to this time a year ago. I know you're in a obviously much different situation, not having to wait for a new head coach to finish a run in a postseason tournament. Do you feel like you're ahead of where you were a year ago? Are you still somewhat kind of in the same flux of a situation? Because I know we had some late additions as well last year. Later than we sit here today.
I think I'm right here. I don't think you were anywhere near Joe Toussaint, Warren, or Devin at this point a year ago. I mean, I think that Joe's scenario was late May, early June. I may be off by a week or two, but I think that's the general time frame. And I know you weren't. I mean, Devin and Warren were kind of like June, July type stuff. So now there was some grad transfer stuff involved there, which the rules have kind of changed a bit there, in that those grad transfer types, they needed to be, like, the rule I think is that they needed to be in the portal window by the time that the portal closed. Whereas before it was like, man, they really can do whatever they want. If they can stay where they're at, they don't have to declare a date or be in the portal. They could just kind of move freely as they wanted to. But so now you would be aware of those options as opposed to them emerging late in the process. Does that make sense? To where, whereas I think Warren and Devin kind of emerged late in the process. Heck, I mean, there was a lot of people that thought Devin was going to go to Oregon, and people were reporting that he wasn't even going to visit here and all those things. And we had information that suggested that he was going to visit Texas Tech and ended up here. And all those things. So I don't know if you'll get too much late in the process candidates this time, just because you're going to be aware of who is available. So I'm just trying. There's been a rule change on the, but to your point, Calvin. I mean, I think you're. I don't know if I want to say you're ahead of where you were last year, but I just this was still. I mean, you're still 2 months out from where you kind of were finalizing stuff, from last year. Now, what has changed the dynamic a little bit is that you've had a staff in place for a full year mostly. Yeah. And so I think people expected more sooner. Don't like to wait, as you just said. And then I think you also are looking around going, man, the old league is not winding down a bit. They're kind of gearing up, and it's a bit scary. I feel a bit vulnerable. Like, it's kind of like the scene in Dumb and Dumber was where Jim Carrey's in the stall and he's like sucking his thumb. He's like, like, oh man, because I mean, we talked about that preseason top 25 the other day, man. It's like you're the Big 12 is the top 5, or 10, and you're not in there, and so you need help. Help wanted sign still up. So.
Does that make Kelvin Sampson Seabass in this picture? I'm trying to figure out who's the guy in the plaid and the vest. Maybe you can let us know who you think the Seabass of the Big 12 would be in the YouTube comments. Okay, good stuff. We're talking about trying to establish chemistry with the roster and who you got chemistry with as far as some potential portal options and targets are out there, and we'll keep you updated as best we can throughout the week on any new names emerging or a possible pivot. But there is other chemistry to be discussed, like Ohio State Rutgers. Do they have any at the end of the day? First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. You might have seen over the weekend Iowa State Athletics Director Jamie Pollard delivering a comment that has gotten some attention as far as the future of the college sports or college football ecosystem. Let's take a listen, if you haven't caught it, to Iowa State Athletics Director Jamie Pollard.
You just have to look at the evolution. It isn't the SEC and Big Ten. It's those that have all the gold, make all the rules, right? So if I was a member of the Big Ten or the SEC, I'd start looking over my shoulder and wondering when's the day going to come when the top of the SEC is not going to want the bottom of the SEC. I mean, go back and look at times when the AFL and the NFL merged, they only needed one commissioner. And when the ABA and the NBA merged, they only needed one commissioner. There's going to come a day they don't need two $6 million a year commissioners, and they're going to eat their own. And if we think that's not going to happen, you're a fool, because we didn't think the Pac-12 would get eaten, and it did. And the CFP is just another example of our industry running amok, and they're trying to swallow the ACC and the Big 12. And I wish them all the best because they're going to eat their own. I'm just saying from an evolution standpoint, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, is the Pac-12 going to be existent in 2025? I think all of us would have said yes. So you don't have to look back very far to see what's happened, and you can see what's happening. And so it's reasonable to project into the future and say, why wouldn't you think that will just continue? That those with the gold will make the rules.
Now, the last line there, those with the gold make the rules, historically has been pretty accurate, but there's part of that, Chris, that I thought did not come off too well from Jamie Pollard, who I don't really have much of a perception of as an athletics director, other than he's long tenured. So I guess there's something that he's been doing right, and it's a fairly healthy athletics department there in Ames, Iowa. But when he talks about, well, nobody would have seen the dissolution of the Pac-12 conference, I'm thinking, what, are you crazy? I mean, I saw the dissolution of the Pac-12 conference 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I'm nobody. I mean, when you're looking at revenue and understanding, again, you got gold, you're making rules, or vice versa. The Pac-12 was in a terrible spot. Now, was it going to be gone by 2025? I don't know, but by 2030, hell yeah. I think that was a guarantee because they had no bullets left to fire in their gun. They were adding nobody. They'd already expanded. Conference championship game, television network, all those things. So that part of it, I'm kind of like, huh? That took you by surprise? A little surprised myself to hear him say that. But as far as the future is concerned, there's some of this I buy into. There's some of this I don't so much buy into, and it's because of that word I've already used, ecosystem. Somebody's got to come in last. And somebody's got to be scheduled for homecoming. And whenever you are chock full of, say, blue bloods or those close to that, I don't know that there really is an appetite to not have Mississippi State on the schedule or Vanderbilt or Illinois or whoever it might be in a football sense. I think the top sort of feeds off the bottom, and the bottom, in a lot of ways, feeds off the top. Maryland, where does your budget come from? It ain't from Maryland athletics. It's from like Michigan being on the schedule every once in a while or whatever. So I sort of buy more so into that. Like it's an ecosystem. One needs the other. What do you make of that? And do you think there is some validity to his comment?
I think that the premise that he's coming from is probably right in that there's already Big Ten schools right now going, what in the hell are we adding Rutgers for? Like, what is this mess? Like, what in the, I mean, like.
To capture the New York market, of course.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. New York, New Jersey market. Yeah.
Right.
And now that a lot of this is going to be determined on like what bills become due. Yeah. And, the revenue sharing, what monies may become available, how the playoffs get tweaked. Because, I mean, based on a conversation that we had last week about the Power Four and the Group of Five doing their own thing and their own playoff system and all that, I mean, there's probably some ACC teams right now that are sitting there going, if this thing goes to 40 or 50 and pares down even more and we kind of do our own thing, I mean, do we have a seat at that table? I mean, and there's probably a lot of ACC schools that probably, maybe some Big 12 schools too. I don't know, but I just think that, typically college football, it drags its feet, which is why NIL is such a mess. And they just kind of like, we're not going to do anything. You get your head in the sand and all that. I just think we'd be naive to think that there wouldn't be some relegation at some point.
There's the word.
Yeah. I mean, like that's what it is. Like to where like, hey man, it's not you, it's us, but appreciate it, man.
It's not you, it's us. Like we're awesome and you're not.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you've done. You helped us get this TV contract, but we no longer need you, and so your flame will now be extinguished. So I just, we don't want to call it like realignment, or maybe we do, or just shifting of the tectonic plates, or however you say that. But I just think we're still in line for more movement as these months and years go, based on.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, and all in between, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what's the holdup? Get in the mix now on all the action by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
We're still in line for more movement as these months and years go, based on how much money we're talking. These athletic directors are very well aware, and some of them are a lot more wiser than others in that they've been through it. They understand, like, you know, DTA, right. Man, don't trust anybody. So, you know what I mean? I mean, yeah. You know, if you're sitting there, if you're Rutgers and you're going, man, I'm fat, I'm happy, I'm good to go. Like, I have no worries in the world for forever. I think you're extremely naive, and I'm just using them as an example because they're kind of an outlier. And there was a time where I thought the SEC may wise up and think about Missouri being that way, but hell, Missouri's like preseason top 10 in football this next year. So, yeah, go figure. So anyway, but that's I think he's probably onto something. I just don't know exactly when and what that would look like. But you know, this is kind of. I mean, we think Greg Sankey's just going to play well. I mean, he brought in Texas into his conference, and he purposely didn't tell one of his conference members because he knew they'd be pissed, being the Aggies. Like, it was a big giant secret, and then he let them blow up and vent and all those things. And he's like, "Yeah, I know, man, it sucks, but hey, this is what we're doing. You know, here we go." That's right. And so we think they wouldn't, like, you know, kind of, hey, man, we're having a meeting. Don't send the invite to these 4 schools. Like, we're just don't tell them no. I mean, you know, we're going to Destin, Florida, the weekend of July. You know, so but it's invite only. You know, I mean, you know, I think you'd be naive to not rule some of those kinds of things out. And so much of it is about bills being, you know, due and what this looks like in the months and years to come.
Yeah, I think you're right about sort of the experience or lack thereof with these things and these harsh realities from athletics director to athletics director or athletics department to athletics department, because obviously in the Big 12 conference, the veneer was stripped away 15 years ago when we went through the first round. You're like, holy crap. Okay, we are going to lose these programs and we are going to be in a different state. And then it came around again later. But if you remember all the kicking and screaming from like Utah or Arizona State, whenever the Pac-12 was falling apart, you're like, this is shocking to you? You're in the league. You get the checks. You see how small they are, don't you? And this is still like kicking and screaming was the way that they had to be drugged to the Big 12 conference. And it was the only thing that was possibly going to happen, and eventually did happen, but it took them a long time, I guess, to go through the stages of grief to understand that was going to be the case. So probably from locale to locale, there is a little bit of a different perspective depending upon what you have been through before. From a Texas Tech perspective, I know that there are birth pangs we're going through, and not all of them have been very pleasant, and some of them have drug out for quite some time. But Chris, I still, and I know there's a fan part of this also that's maybe just based in hope, so I'll admit that up front. But I don't find many or any metrics. And this is beyond, like, talking about Missouri and how good of a football team they have. This is beyond a win-loss record kind of thing. It really is. There are so many other metrics to gauge these programs by and their worthiness of inclusion here or there or not. I don't find many or any where Texas Tech is not represented in about a top 35 kind of capacity. And maybe you can stretch it to top 40 if you're skeptical of what I'm saying at 35. And my belief still is 40 is safe. 35 is safe. You're, as far as remaining in a major competition kind of picture. What that looks like as far as conferences or a super league or an NIL super league, which we'll get to coming up in an episode here this week. Some interesting stuff there. I still feel good as a Tech fan, even though, again, the labor pains are very much being felt by Red Raider fans. I understand that. But that's just my perspective on the future. We'd love to hear about yours in the YouTube comments. So dive in and get into the dust up. But yeah, would love to hear what you think about Jamie Pollard's comments.
And I don't,
interesting to say the least.
Well, and Kellen, I don't know what brought this commentary on. I didn't hear the line of questioning that he got to really, wax poetic on this subject. I don't know if this was just something he wanted to get off his chest, if this was he
Probably.
was asked about some hypotheticals. But I mean, a lot of times, and this made some news, obviously, late last week. But it was certainly something that he had thought a lot about and had some opinions on. But what will create the next? Because do I see like some shift happening immediately with all this and that? Not necessarily, but the next thing that's going to cause it is why the group of five playoff or only playoff in their own set of rankings and all that conversation came up last week. Is that it's the revenue sharing and component, and that's what would cause a bit of a split between those that could do it and those that couldn't afford to, kind of thing, or the way that Congress is going to say this is what we want you to do or whatever. That's going to, I think, cause some of this. And but I think credit to the group of five folks for being proactive with a lot of having a plan instead of going, okay, well, what now? Well, they're trying to fundraise, they're trying to organize, they're trying to let's do our own thing, let's have our own set of rankings. They're trying to be very proactive because they can see the light at the end of the tunnel and the train's coming. And
Right.
So they're trying to be proactive as opposed to the whole NIL thing where the NCAA and just everybody was like, no, we don't want to do this. And then it happens and you're like, it's just like,
well, and it is like proactive with your back against the wall. They certainly were not ahead. They were not ahead of the curve. It's like, the witch under the house and the Wizard of the Oz when her toes are curling up and she's thinking, I don't know, maybe I should start fundraising or something like, yeah, you may want to think about a different kind of option.
One of the scariest television characters in all of cinema for one Chris level was the original Wicked Witch of the West. When I was a wee little tyke, they'd play that Wizard of Oz for 3 hours. It was it would always come on around the same time of the year. I can't remember if it was a Thanksgiving time or something. It would always they'd play it, and those flying monkeys and that Wicked Witch.
Yes, that's.
I mean, I had legit nightmares as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid about that character, man. And I remember when those underneath the deal in the house there, I was like, good, man, I go do something again, put another house on top.
You thought it was over.
Yeah, I don't ever want to see that mean lady again. I was like, yeah, freaking me out.
Yeah, the monkeys are scary enough. You attach wings to them, that is a nightmare. There's no question about that. Thankfully, science has not advanced that far, but you never know what's around the corner. All right, Chris, what I know around the corner is a lot of fun this week. So looking forward to more episodes with you today. We're going to get back to the NIL Super League. We'll get back to Jeff Linder. I have not seen an announcement from Texas Tech, but he's got a double T in his Twitter bio, and Wyoming has hired a head coach. So that gives you some indication, I guess, as to the finalization of that. So we'll get back around to that on an upcoming episode as well, man. Appreciate the time as always. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
Yes, sir. Keep hope alive. Have a good week, folks, or start of the week, I should say. Well, keep hope alive. We'll be back again tomorrow.
And subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.